What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Saturday morning edition of the College Football Show here on RotoGrinders. Happy to be with you, breaking down another college football slate. We'll have a wild week of college football next week, a few different slates with the Thanksgiving holiday. There's always a few games on Friday, so I hope you're looking forward to a holiday week full of family and football. And we're going to, before we get there, break down this Saturday slate, which is a fairly interesting one. Some good games tonight as well. And to help do that, I am Justin Van Zuiden, STL Cardinals 84. I've got the Gridiron Scholar, John Laub, alongside as usual. John, how you doing on this Saturday morning?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to about a week of incredible college football. Love the Thanksgiving weekend. Big rivalry week coming up. So I'm looking forward to everything. We have a really nice slate today and some Heisman candidates we get to decide if we want to put into our DFS lineups.
Yeah, and kind of an odd week where they're really, at least on the main slate here today, not a whole lot of injuries to talk about. Of course, on the night slate tonight, we've got Texas, and Jonathan Brooks has been lost for the season, so huge loss there for Texas. They are not on the main slate here this morning, so we don't have to worry about that. But just not a whole lot on the wires as far as what we're looking at for main slate injury news today. Is there anything that you're keeping an eye on or think we need to monitor? I just really haven't seen much today.
No, I woke up at 7 a.m. I have a couple accounts that I follow on X for injuries, and nothing has popped up that is shocking yet. So yeah, crossing my fingers that we don't get any last second news, my friend.
Yeah, we could have a quiet day on that front. Of course, you never know when something's going to pop up in college football. And for that reason, always good to check out our college football Discord channel that is free to access as long as you are a RotoGrinders member. You don't have to be a premium subscriber in order to access that Discord. RotoGrinders.com/Discord or follow the links through the website. We've got a college football specific channel in there where our projections team keeps you posted on any updates there, and we'll try to, that's the most efficient place, at least for us, to pass along injury updates as they come along the wire. So if you're checking us out on YouTube this morning, as always, we appreciate if you give us a thumbs up. We'll get to some questions later on in the show. But first, let's go ahead and just kind of start breaking things down at quarterback like we usually do. You mentioned Heisman candidates on the slate today. We've got 4 top-end quarterbacks with Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, and Drake May all on the main slate. I don't think we've had this many kind of top-end quarterbacks all together on the main slate in quite some time. So, if you've got top dollar to spend, certainly 4 guys that have significant upside. USC is projected for about 36 points today. Oregon and Oklahoma both projected for about 40. North Carolina probably has the toughest matchup of the group against Clemson. You have a take on these top 4 quarterbacks today?
Looking at our projections, Justin, what I did this morning was I built a GPP lineup around Bo Nix. Right now, we have him projected at 2%. If I can get Bo Nix at that percentage, and I want to differentiate from sliding off of Bucky Irvin, we'll talk about him later. Bo Nix has huge upside. We saw him put up over 40 points last week. It was a late game, so maybe people didn't watch the game, but I did, man. That offense is clicking, and if I can get a 35-point upside quarterback, I'm going to take it at 2% ownership. So that, to me, is just such a nice GPP pivot if you feel comfortable with that. And I do like Caleb under-owned right now. Caleb, we know the upside. Is this his last game at USC? A lot of different voices, a lot of people saying things. I still think he will probably play the last game, but maybe not. I understand if he makes a professional decision at this point. But I get, at 12% ownership, I like that. And I love Dylan Gabriel for cash. I mean, I have no question. I think Dylan Gabriel is an easy lock for cash this week.
Yeah, he's certainly the best floor of the group. They've got a great matchup against BYU, projected for about 40 points. Interesting to see what happens here with Caleb Williams, depending on how that USC game goes today. But the good news for daily fantasy, anyway, we only have to worry about this week. We don't have to try to project what if he's going to sit out going forward. So today, it seems like he's going to be fine. I think Gabriel's the clear play there. I think Williams and Nix for GPPs are certainly intriguing as well. Nix definitely has the capability to outscore those other guys, and you're going to get him at a real fraction of the ownership. I think he'll be higher owned than the 2% that we have him at, but still not like he's going to be, 15, 20 or anything like that. The next range of quarterbacks, because almost everybody that spends up is going to go to one of those top four. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of ownership on Carson Beck, Jack Plummer, those guys. I don't mind Beck over on FanDuel, but here on DraftKings, I think if you're getting there, you might as well get up to Gabriel, who's only like $800 more expensive. So from the top end guys, that kind of takes us into a middle tier of, Jordan McLeod for the. Did you see, by the way, this whole thing with JMU appealing to be able to be eligible for the conference championship because they're doing the whole, transition from D2 or FCS, and they're undefeated and they can't even play in their conference championship game, and the NCAA declined their appeal to be eligible, even though they're undefeated and clearly deserving of a shot. It's just so stupid. I'm like, the NCAA makes up their rules on the fly, so. Yeah, JMU not going to be allowed to participate in the conference championship game. So maybe they take all their frustrations out on Appalachian State today.
I'll digress for a second. I can't believe the NCAA, just for television, right? Wouldn't you want JMU undefeated and people would put eyeballs on the screen? And I know it's a little bit narrative street, but ESPN was at James Madison today, right? The fans look fired up. I think App State is going to get whacked today because the Dukes want to prove something. So I do love Jordan McLeod on this slate. He does have slate busting upside. He could run for 2 touchdowns and throw for 3 or 4. So I love McLeod in this matchup, my friend.
Yeah, narrative street or not, it's a good spot, and and he comes a good bit cheaper. And it would be great for the Sun Belt to have the exposure of the undefeated team in the conference championship game, but you're not going to get that, and you're going to get Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. So get super excited for conference championship week. They can't set the totals for Iowa low enough these days. We're digressing a little bit here, but we got plenty of time. I actually can't. I can't bet the Iowa game today because they're playing Illinois, and I can't bet on Illinois college schools. So I was looking, I couldn't see the total. All right, so it's 32.5 today is the Iowa total.
Ooh, a boondoggle of points expected.
Yeah, it's about 5 points higher than last week. Well, it's because Illinois has a explosive offense now after last week, so maybe that's why. All right, so yeah, McLeod certainly a fine play in that mid range there. Do you like him better than say like a Donovan Smith? I think Sam Hartman's getting some buzz today as well. Revenge game for him. Any other guys you like or Beck in kind of this mid-range of quarterbacks?
So you mentioned Beck on FanDuel. We can talk about it later. I like him on FanDuel. The problem here is the rushing upside with the 100-yard bonus is such a tempting for quarterbacks dual threat. I don't like Beck here per se, unless you're differentiating. But Donovan Smith, he's the one. I'm having a conundrum. I only have him in 1 of 4 lineups. And the reason is he is wildly inconsistent. Man, he could go out and have a 35-point day, but Justin, he could throw up a stinker with 6 points and get benched. I mean, I don't like that fluctuation. So I'm kind of, we have him projected at 29%. I have him at a lower percentage in my own personal lineups because I'm afraid of the floor. I think it's very concerning, but I do see the ceiling, so I get it. And Hartman, it's not something happened with Hartman, right? I don't know if it's the receivers have fallen apart. He's lost his 2 top tight ends, so that Notre Dame offense isn't clicking. I think they've even gone further to a running game with Audric Estime. So I just don't see the ceiling with Hartman right now, my friend. I know it's the revenge game, but what is he? Is he going to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns? I just don't see it in any way. Maybe you get 3 touchdowns in a best case scenario. I think they're going to run the ball too much.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I did tag him as a tournament option just because I'm a
Yes.
sucker for the revenge narrative, and he did have 68 rushing yards last week, so maybe he can use his legs a little bit more. Obviously, he's not a big runner, and he's had some games with negative rush yards, but I'm a sucker for the revenge narrative a little bit, so I'll throw him in some GPP lineups today. But certainly don't think if you're playing one lineup or just maybe even a three max that you probably want to go there today. Just because a lot of these guys, though, are inconsistent. You mentioned Smith being a little bit inconsistent. I don't love playing Klubnik, though he's got a good matchup today. Just not a big Klubnik guy. Alan Bowman, like that Oklahoma State offense was alarmingly bad last week. Certainly that burned a bunch of lineups. We'll talk about that when we get to Ollie Gordon, but it's pretty ugly in terms of the middle range here. So I'll throw Hartman on a few lineups just because I don't really like a whole lot of options here today. The other guy that is getting some ownership is Ethan Garbers, simply because they're playing USC and anybody against USC is viable. So, I mean, out of this group, Klubnik, maybe throw Bryson Barnes in there, Bowman, Garbers. Like, is there anybody you actually like in here?
There is one player I like for GPP only. I do like Joey Aguilar of the Mountaineers. I expect the Dukes and James Madison to put points up. If you want to come back on the other side, Aguilar is very interesting. He's only 7,500. And in the last 4 games, he's gotten 26, 37, 25, and 22 DraftKings points. He's also a dual threat. He's got over 120 rushing yards in the last 4 games. So I do like Aguilar if you want to, put in a GPP and kind of stack that game. I like Aguilar coming back against the Dukes there.
All right. And, I don't mind throwing Garbers in some lineups. He's 6,400, really cheap. You can certainly get some exposure to anybody that's playing USC. Defense allows. Yeah, I mean, it's just points upon points. So, UCLA projected for 30 today. Most of their skill players are really cheap. You can pair Garbers up with the pass catcher if you want and get some upside there. But the bottom end of quarterback today is pretty weak. That's why you're probably definitely going to want to spend up for at least one option, and then maybe your second option, if you go 2 QBs, is in the middle range. Do you think this is one of those weeks? We both kind of do the quarterback and the super flex quite often, but maybe a week where you can get away with only using one quarterback.
I agree. I have 4 cash game lineups. That's kind of how I play, enter a bunch of different. I have 2 of the 4 only have one quarterback. I do think this is a week where you can put a running back because there's a lot of high-end options at running back and some value. So I feel pretty comfortable in 2 of my 4 lineups where I'm going to running back in the super flex. I think that's a great question on your strategy today. And I'm not a big, non-quarterback super flex, but when the slate and the salaries dictate it, Justin, I'm willing to pivot. So this is one of those weeks where I think it's worth pivoting.
Yeah, certainly think that's an option today as well if you decide you want to go there. So we are in agreement. All right, let's go ahead and move to running back. And, we mentioned last week, just a great spot for Ollie Gordon against that UCF rush defense. Somebody posted in the chat last week that Ollie Gordon was minus 750 to score a touchdown. Hopefully none of you bet that because it didn't happen. Oklahoma State just could not get anything going offensively. And after putting up, 150, 200 plus yard performances throughout the year, it was just a stunner to see Ollie Gordon completely shut down. Obviously, the game script was a problem from the get-go. Just 12 carries for 25 yards for Ollie Gordon. The offense scored just 3 points. Alan Bowman barely completed 50% of his passes, threw 3 interceptions, and UCF just absolutely dominated that game, almost 600 yards of offense. And Ollie Gordon was, upwards of like 70% owned. Similarly good matchup today. Oklahoma State projected for 33 points again. And now Ollie Gordon, while still popular, down to about 20% projected ownership instead of 70 plus. So what do we do with Ollie Gordon and Oklahoma State today?
I'm not sure if I'm a glutton for punishment or what, Justin, but I'm jumping right back into the Ollie Gordon. I have him in 3 of my 4 cash game lineups. The ceiling is so high with Gordon. He had a 3-game stretch that was unbelievable. I watched that use at least the first half. I watched the first half of the UCF Oklahoma State. It just got away so quick. I think there was 2 turnovers by the Cowboys early. Like you mentioned, he only got 12 carries in that game. Oklahoma State still has a good shot at a nice bowl matchup. I still believe that he's a great player. I think he gets 25 touches in this game. I'm going to put him in 3 of my 4. There's always the risk, right, in any DFS lineup. But I'm going right back. I feel confident Ollie Gordon and the Cowboys bounce back here.
Yeah, I like him today. I think that I totally agree on the thought process, and he's my top running back option today, especially at that lower ownership. 8,800. It is a hefty price tag, but you can fit him in there. Not playing much Corum. Again, we talked about him last week. There just hasn't been a ceiling there for Corum all year long. Did manage his best game of the season last week with 29.5 fantasy points in a pretty good performance against a good Penn State team, but just not sold on him at that salary. Just play Gordon if you're up there. You've got Estime, who's been a workhorse for Notre Dame right underneath him. You've got Bucky Irving for Oregon, who's coming off a 100-plus yard game of his own and has a rushing touchdown in 6 straight games. So you can just play those guys as well if you're looking in the high end of running backs. And then Hampton for UNC, also coming off a huge game last week against Duke. So you mentioned a lot of high-end running backs today. Of those guys, Corum, Estime, Irving, Hampton, you like any of those guys today?
The one player that I do like the best is Estime. I mean, we have him at 28% projected ownership. I just think this is a smash spot for Notre Dame to run the football against Wake Forest. I mean, Notre Dame right now, their game plan is pretty simple, right? Run Estime, play defense. I don't like the Wake Forest offense. They've fallen apart. They've been so good for so long. They just haven't been able to replace Hartman. I do understand the revenge game narrative with Hartman, but rational coaching says smash Estime. You also remember you were saying in that blowout game in the fourth quarter they were still playing Estime.
Yep.
What was that? 3 or 4 weeks ago, and every time
it was against USC.
There you go. It was against USC, and they're running him in a blowout. I just feel like he gets 25 carries as no brainer. And this is what is interesting, I think, because we talked about Bo Nix. Look at Bucky Irvin. We have him at 31 projected ownership. I think you kind of have to fade him in GPPs at that high of ownership and go with Nix. And I agree with you, Nix will be more than that percentage owned. But I do like pivoting off of Irvin, going with Nix and GPP. I like Irvin. But I'm in on Hampton this week. It's kind of a conundrum where if you look at the stats, Clemson is decent against the run. It's not a mind-blowing matchup. But this is where I think eyeballs matter, watching games matter, Justin. 2 things here. I don't think Clemson's that great on the defensive front. They're good, but they're not what they were like 4 years ago. 2, North Carolina's been Hampton lately. He's just getting spinny touches, Justin. I mean, they're going to run him, and he had 8 receptions. They unlocked him in the passing game. I love Hampton here against Clemson. Even though the matchup doesn't look great, I think he's in a very good spot.
Yeah, I like him too. I think he's just clearly established himself as one of the better backs in college football at 7,300. Not an overwhelming price tag. And I'm with you. I'm just not as sold on that Clemson defense. It's obvious they aren't as good as they were a couple years ago. And I think they can put up some numbers. And you look at last week, Hampton had 31 carries for 169 yards. The rest of the running backs combined for North Carolina had 1 carry. British Brooks had 1 carry. So Hampton with 31 carries, just dominating the touches in that backfield. And certainly that'll be the case today. And, in a game that carries a good amount of importance in terms of the standings, with UNC at 8-2, just inside the top 25 there. So totally agree on Hampton being the best option in that range. Jawar Jordan is right there as well. He can be considered for GPPs. Carson Steele, if you follow the anybody against USC philosophy. Penn State gets Rutgers today. If you want to try to figure out which one of their running backs the Magic 8 Ball says to go with. Is there anybody else kind of in this 6K price range that's worth a head nod? That's kind of a dead zone for me.
It is a dead zone. I mean, I did Carson Steele. If you do want to take a GPP flyer, I know they got TJ Harden. UCLA also has Ethan Garber as a quarterback. You have Carson Steele against this USC defense, right, Justin? And I know you and I are putting players in lineups against USC, at least in the last 5-6 weeks when we knew they were this bad of a defense. The question is, last week, Carson Steele didn't get the touches that we had hoped. But this is a smash spot for the UCLA running game. So I do like Carson. We have him at less than 4% ownership. If you're looking at matchup, you're looking at an offense that should run the ball a lot. I like Carson Steele here.
Yeah, I think it's a nice bounce back spot, obviously at lower ownership with people kind of nervous about the touches. But I think if he gets the hot hand, he'll be the guy you want there. So, but you can certainly skip over that range if you want. As we get down into the 5Ks, we talked about that Clemson split backfield last week. Maffa ended up a little more production than Shipley. They pretty much split the work down the middle. We've got them both projected around 15, 16 fantasy points today. I think the guy that people will really be interested in is Gavin Sawchuk for Oklahoma. That backfield has been a pain to figure out all year, but over the last 3 weeks, his production has really ramped up. I think Sawchuk has his firm grip on the first touches in that Oklahoma backfield now. So do you have a take on Clemson and Oklahoma's running back situations here?
I love the matchup for Clemson because we know North Carolina, their defense isn't very good, folks. They've been in a bunch of shootouts this year with Drake May and Hampton putting points on the board, and the defense doesn't come back. The question to me, it is a split backfield. It just drives us crazy in DFS. If you're looking to start one of them, I believe if you think Clemson's going to win, I'm going Maffa. Maffa's the closer. Maffa's the pounder. Maffa's the guy to clock kill. Remember clock killing Dylan in New England? I think Maffa's the guy you pound North Carolina with late in the game. Yet, if you think North Carolina is going to jump ahead here, I like Shipley because he's the pass catcher. He's the guy I think if they're down by 10 points, I expect Shipley to be more involved. But if you're not sure and you don't want to project who's going to win in touches, just stay away from it. But that's how I dealt with it. I do like Sawchuk. I was very weary of this Oklahoma running game. It's been a Gordian knot. But we have back-to-back games with 100 yards rushing from Sawchuk. And Justin, I went searching this week on Thursday. The quotes coming out of Oklahoma indicate that Sawchuk has kind of won this job. If you listen to Venables, he keeps talking about Sawchuk deserves the carry. Sawchuk has been the best player. So at 5,500, with an implied 40-point total, maybe they won't run Dylan Gabriel near the goal line, right, Justin? Maybe we get those 2 touchdowns from Sawchuk. So I do like him at 5,500. I mean, this is a matchup where I like to put my DFS lineups around. We have a big home favorite with a hot running back. I like Sawchuk here.
Yeah, I think they ride the hot hand here. And they're projected, as a 24-point favorite in this game. So I think he's the option there. I'd rather take a shot on him as opposed to trying to figure out the Clemson backfield. Jonah Coleman all the way down at the end of the 5K range at 5,000. We've seen him kind of emerge for Arizona. Tough matchup today for them against Utah, but obviously we saw Washington put up some points against them last week. So volume-based, fine option. TJ Harden, if you think that maybe Steele isn't the guy for UCLA, you can go there for a little bit cheaper. Lawton for JMU is going to get a lot of ownership just because he's really cheap today. It seems like when these kind of mid-major schools are on the slates, they tend to underprice their running backs. I've noticed throughout the year. But your thoughts on the value options here at running back?
If you're not, we're going to talk about some hot pass catchers. But if you're not into the JMU passing game, I have no problem switching to Lawton at running back. He is a nice value. He's only 4.6. We have a 32 point implied total. As I mentioned before, I like JMU in this spot, so he's interesting. But I do like Jonah Coleman very much for GPPs. It is a tough matchup, my friend, but Arizona can put points on the board. You just mentioned it, right? I do like the Wildcats. They're one of the funner teams. They've been providing us with real nice fantasy value this year. So if you do want to go different, I like Jonah Coleman in this matchup. Even though it might be tough against Utah, I think he's got some value here.
Yeah, I like Arizona too. A fun team to keep an eye on, and again, even in a tough matchup, I think they're solid. So, anybody else here at the value end of running back that you want to touch on?
There's no one else. I don't think there is a lot of great value at running back. I think the value or the decision is to pay up and how many will you go for. Maybe a Marshawn Lloyd at USC. His ceiling is 40. If he could get, but he is in that timeshare with, why can't I remember the guy, Austin Jones? So that's a conundrum. But Marshawn Lloyd is someone who I would be interested in a GPP if USC is going to put up 40 points again.
All right, let's go ahead and move to wide receiver. And this is the spot where people are going to save money today. You look at all the high-end wide receivers, really low ownership today. Franklin is just tough to get to. Tez Walker has all of a sudden seen his price jump way up. Brock Bowers is back, but he's 7,500. Jamari Thrash is super hit or miss. I do like him for GPPs today, but none of these top-end wide receivers feel like an absolute must. And this, if you're, we talked about limited value at running back, limited value at quarterback. You're going to see people prioritize saving some money at the wide receiver spots today. Is there anybody you like up here? I mean, Stoops is the first guy that's actually getting some ownership at 6.8K. So anybody you think's worth spending up on here?
I will say I pivoted away from the high-priced wide receivers in my cash games. I think it is a very nice spot for GPP because you can get some. I think you're getting real value. Tez Johnson, if you haven't seen him at Oregon, he's been smoking hot for the Ducks this year. And we have him right now. I think he's going to be above 1% ownership. But, man, if I can get Tez Johnson, Franklin, and Bo Nix, and I find value at every other spot, you're going to have to find value every other spot. I think that's a really nice GPP. The one guy I do like in cash games is I'm into Drake Stoops. I've just watched too much of Oklahoma. Justin, every time I see him, he's wide open. He is so good on these medium level crossing routes. Now, part of it is scheme. Part of it is ability. Dylan Gabriel trusts him. He's just wide open all the time, and they throw to him in the end zone. So I do like Drake Stoops in this matchup in cash game. I think I'd stay away from in GPP because there's so much ownership in there. But I don't think Brock Bowers, I can't go there. I just, we mentioned Carson Beck, same type of dilemma. Are they going to blow him out? How many targets? What's his ceiling? And I'm a big Brock Bowers guy. I love Thrash early in the year. Jack Plummer and that passing game is really kind of cooled off. So I do like him in GPP, but not in cash.
Yeah, I think you just avoid this whole group in cash games for sure. I do like Thrash in tournaments, but you just got to save some money at the wide receiver position today. And the 6K options, if I just sort by projected fantasy points, right? 6K, 5K, 5K, 6K, 5K. I mean, it's not, they're projecting just as well outside of Franklin, who's very expensive. These guys project just as well. So you might as well take the savings. So Where that saving starts to come in is with the Houston guys and then the JMU guys. Probably a couple situations that we need to talk about here. Let's see if I just sort by. I can't find Houston in here. Where are they? Where is that Houston
I'm
game? There it
looking.
is. I got it.
I'm looking also.
Yeah, so Houston, that's a 4:00 kick, so it's one of the last games on the main slate. We've got Samuel Brown, Dalton Carnes, Joseph Manjack, all with pretty good point per dollar projections today. Samuel Brown projects the best. Of course, he's also the most expensive, but we know that Oklahoma State defense does tend to struggle at times. So your thoughts on the Houston wide receivers today?
I pivoted to 3 lineups with Manjack in it. I'll take the savings. He's been very good down the stretch here, my friend. He's got 18, 20, 15, and 19 DraftKings points in the last 4 games. There is a little inconsistency with Donovan Smith, but game script tells us, I mean, this is a sneaky shootout. I kind of like, before last week's debacle, I did like the Oklahoma State offense. I don't think they're going to go away. Houston's not very good on the defensive side, so I like Manjack a lot. He's been scoring touchdowns. Samuel Brown, who do we have at higher ownership? We have Manjack.
We got them both around 10.
Oh, that's nice at 10% ownership. I have Manjack in all of my or in 3 of my 4 cash game lineups, and you can go with Brown. I have him in the other one. So I like Manjack more if I had choosing between the 2.
And part of the reason why their ownership is maybe just a little bit lower than we expected is just because the JMU guys pop so much. You can roll the dice, I guess, whether you want to play Brown or Surratt or both. I mean, they're both in the 5Ks, both project for just as many points as some of the higher end running or wide receivers on the slate. If I sort by point per dollar, they're both within the top 5 or 6 here. You have a take? Just play them both. How are we handling the JMU receivers?
Justin, in 2 of my 4 lineups, I have both. I think they're definitely worth both playing. In 3 of the 4, I have Surratt. I do prefer Surratt a little bit more than Brown, but it's very close. And if you told me at the end of the day Brown has 33 points and Surratt has 25 points, it would not surprise me. But I think this passing game can support both of them. And at that salary for 3 times, we're looking at about 17 points each. And our projections have Surratt at 17.4, Brown at 16.4. I think there's higher ceiling. So I like both of them. Do not be afraid to put both in your lineups.
Yeah, totally fine with either of them today as well. Let's see. There's quite a few teams that have several receivers in this range. Oklahoma State on the other side of that game against Houston, all their receivers are cheap as well. Leon Johnson has started to get some buzz. He's 4,800. Owens and Presley have kind of been the more consistent guys throughout the season, but they're all really cheap. If you want to go for Clemson, their guys are all really cheap, and you can just get all sorts of options here in this 5K range. You have a take on Oklahoma State's receivers, or really, anybody else kind of in that 5K range? I suppose we, of course, need to talk about UCLA as well because they're playing USC.
I do like Leon Johnson, and it's really only based on price savings. I think the ceiling, if you're going to go off Ollie Gordon or you don't feel comfortable with him, I feel very good with Owens, Presley, or Johnson. I prefer Johnson of the 3. That's the player that I'm going to target in my cash game lineups. But he also has the highest percent. I'm just noticing they're all over 22% ownership. So I kind of would pivot from GPP lineups in there. The ownerships are kind of high. But in cash games, I like Johnson for the savings there. And I do, as we mentioned, I think this is a sneaky shootout here.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And then, of course, I mentioned UCLA. I think Logan Loya is a fine option today at 4,500. Sturdivant at 3,900. The USC secondary has just been woeful. I know UCLA isn't the most explosive offense, but these guys are really affordable. You can get some exposure there. And really, you can go with 3 cheap. If I go with 3 cheap receivers today, let's say I just do a sample here. Let's say I put one of the JMU guys in there. I put Loya in there. I put Leon Johnson in there, and all of a sudden I've got, $7,000 on average to spend for my remaining 5 spots, as opposed to the 6,250 that you start with. And that makes it easier to get the Ollie Gordons and the Dylan Gabriels of the world into your lineup. So that's just how most people are going to handle the wide receiver positions today. So any other thoughts? Just open it up at this point to mid-range and value receivers that we haven't covered that you think are worth talking about.
Well, I agree with you with Logan Loya. I like him at that value. I've been going against the USC defense all year. I'm not going to stop right now. Sturdivant is a conundrum because I thought over the summer I like Sturdivant, but he's just been, let's just be honest, he hasn't been good.
Yeah.
So sometimes the eyeball test tells you a lot, and I just don't know if something happened. He came over, he was a transfer from California, so I don't have any Sturdivant today. But when I look at the rest of, I don't think, I guess some people have asked me about Phoenix Sproles, who's kind of the third receiver for James Madison. I said, we have him projected at 9 points. He has 5% ownership. He's only 3.6. I did not put him in any of my lines, but people have asked me about him. Total salary saver alone. So that's the only thing maybe. And I wanted to jam some of these Miami receivers in, but I don't really like them. We don't know who to trust. Xavier Respo, Jacoby George, right? I look at all them. If you could tell me one guy's going to get 12 targets, I would be all in on it. But I just can't tell which one's going to be great. So I guess they could be GPP options, but definitely not cash game.
I did actually bet the over on Restrepo's receiving yards today. I'm not playing it. I'm not playing any of them DFS. But his over under is 42 yards. So, this was the guy that in the middle of the year, he was their pretty clear wide receiver one. He's fallen. Their whole passing attack has been brutal the last few weeks.
That's the problem.
I think George's number was a little bit higher because he's been better of late, but I still trust Restrepo the most. The problem is in DFS, he's also he's 6,600, which is just ridiculous at this point. He's the same prices, around the same prices like Stoops and Thrash and the Samuel Browns. You just can't play Restrepo over those guys in DFS. But I do like him over, I think 42.5 receiving yards is what I bet him at today. So, but a stay away for DFS purposes. All right. Somebody in the YouTube chat, Denny, was asking about Drake May. I responded to that question in the chat. Don't love him today, but certainly he's fine for GPPs. We got a FanDuel question. We'll touch on that in just a second. And again, if you're watching us on YouTube and you like the show on Saturday mornings, only got a few weeks left with you here for college football. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button. We appreciate that very much. All right, it's that time of the show where we get ready to pivot and talk about FanDuel. But before we do that, for those of you that may have tuned in a little bit late, we do a little recap here of John's fantastic 4 plays to use in DraftKings games today. John, who do you like for your fantastic 4 today?
I have a great fantastic 4 you can put into our lineup optimizer today. I'm going to center my fantastic 4 and most of my cash game lineups around Jordan McLeod at quarterback. I do like James Madison to really pop here in the passing game. I also like McLeod because we didn't talk about, but he's a dual threat running back. He has a really nice opportunity. He can get you 40 yards rushing pretty easy and a rushing touchdown, especially with some concern in the backfield. It looks like they only have one back who we can count on. So I like McLeod a lot around the goal line. I'm going to start my fantastic 4 with him. I put in Elijah Surratt. That's the dynamic duo that I like for James Madison. His ceiling, he does have 35-point ceiling. I think you have a really nice 15-point floor. So start my fantastic 4. My lineup builds around McLeod and Surratt. I'm all in on Ollie Gordon. Justin, I know it was bad. I think they bounce back. Plug Ollie Gordon into your lineups. The ceiling is too enticing. I just see too many touches. I'm going with process. The process says he bounces back here, so I like him. Game script, everything. And then I like Gavin Sawchuk. We need a salary saver. I wanted to give our viewers an opportunity to plug in some other running backs, but I'm getting a 40-point implied total with a home running back. I'll take that any day for 55. So the Fantastic Four is McLeod and Surratt at quarterback, wide receiver, and I'm going with Sawchuk and Gordon in the backfield.
All right, love those picks today. I think they're certainly fine to use in any DFS format. We did have somebody asking, looking for a 3K play if Keegan Jones is viable for UCLA. I know we mentioned basically anybody against USC, but he doesn't have a single multi-catch game this year. I just don't see a ceiling there, even though you're probably not looking for much at 3K. I'd play Sproles at 3,600 before I went down to 3K there. So, all right, so let's go ahead and pivot over to FanDuel. As always, we like to touch on this.
We have a question up there, my friend, that's interesting. Did you see it on the screen? It says Gordon for GPPs as well on DraftKings. That's a fascinating question. We have him. What do we have him at 20% ownership? I switched my screen to the
20%. I mean, that's not a ton, and especially when you consider 70 something last week. And if he has the capability to outscore every other running back by 10 or 15 points. So yeah, I'm fine with him even in GPPs today.
I agree with that. Yes, especially if we get him at like 25% ownership.
All right, if we pivot to some of the later games, the FanDuel slate has the Texas Tech game on their main slate. So you got Plumlee, you got Taj Brooks in there, Kansas State and Kansas on the FanDuel slate as well, Florida, Missouri on the FanDuel slate, Kentucky, South Carolina, Washington, Oregon State could be the game of the day there, Texas and Iowa State on that FanDuel slate. Also, again, mentioned at the beginning of the show, Jonathan Brooks out for the year for Texas, so that impacts them to some degree. You're probably going to see maybe a committee approach there with Texas at the running back position. But what are some of your thoughts at quarterback on the FanDuel slate?
I think it's very interesting because if the pricing's tight, right? And on FanDuel, Dylan Gabriel is the most expensive, $12K. You're really good. I think he was fourth or fifth quarterback on DraftKings. So we do see a big difference on FanDuel. So I'm going to tend to pivot down. One player that I really like on the FanDuel slate is Brady Cook. Brady Cook, man, we've talked about him a little bit this year. He is listed as probable, so I'm hoping that ownership stays a little bit down. We have him projected at 16%. But, man, I think Brady Cook, he's one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league. I love him here very much. I do think that Carson Beck is a little bit more in play on FanDuel. He's way down in pricing compared to what he is on DK, and you don't get the rushing bonus. So I think that's very interesting. And then we've talked about him. I can't believe I'm going to say his name again. But Graham Mertz of Florida, he's a possibility here. You know, they should be playing from behind the Gators. Graham Mertz has been good. I mean, every week I watch him, he's been impressive. So if you want to, save some money at the quarterback position, I think Graham Mertz is the lowest that I'm willing to go.
You're coming in muted, Justin. It doesn't
sorry.
say you're muted, but so it must be on the mic.
No, yeah, I had myself muted for a second there. Sorry. Mertz at 8,300, I think is certainly okay. I think Rattler's fine though as well. I think you got to pair him with Leggett if you want to play him, but not much cheaper than that. And we mentioned there's not a whole lot on the cheap at quarterback today, so I don't hate going down there if you're uncomfortable with the rest of your lineup builds. And going cheap at quarterback helps make everything work out. Running backs, you got Gordon there as well. We talked about Cody Schrader last week. This guy's just turned into a beast throughout the year. Though he got a huge price bump on FanDuel to 10.5. Maybe a better play on the DraftKings night slate, but he is going to get some ownership. I think I like Taj Brooks a little bit better. And we talked about this UCF rush defense last week with Gordon. I don't see them winning by 5 scores again today. I think Taj Brooks has a nice day.
Oh, I love Taj Brooks on this FanDuel slate. I mean, Cody Schrader, also part of his DraftKings and his production, he was so good in the receiving. I think he had a 75-yard pass catch touchdown, and he had over 100 yards receiving and 100 yards rushing. So the numbers are kind of inflated. I don't expect 100 yards receiving again. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I just don't foresee it 2 weeks in a row for Schrader. So I love Brooks. He's 9.8. I can't imagine. Is UCF going to jump out in front 2 games in a row? Is that rush defense going to show up for a second week in a row? I'm not willing to say that this is a trend yet. I think it's an anomaly. So I love Taj Brooks against UCF this week.
We do have a question in the Discord. Somebody asking, would you go with in FanDuel cash? Would you go with Gordon or save the $1,000 and go with Brooks?
Oh, I'm going with Brooks.
Yeah, I like that play on FanDuel. Yeah, obviously you don't have Brooks on the DraftKings slate, so I think Gordon will maybe end up even coming in at a little bit lower ownership than we have on FanDuel. So again, I still think Gordon's fine for GPPs over there as well. Damian Martinez really cheap on FanDuel at 8,500. He has become, a 100-yard beast every week for Oregon State. Obviously, tougher matchup today, but that's a pretty cheap salary tag. CJ Baxter's likely going to get the first look at carries for Texas. Again, mentioned with Jonathan Brooks being out. Baxter at 7,700. Anybody else you think we need to touch on at running back here on FanDuel?
Mario Anderson is a possibility if you want to go real low at 6.8. If you haven't been watching South Carolina, obviously Spencer Rattler is playing better football, and you mentioned Leggett, which we can get into. But Mario Anderson's playing pretty good football. It took him all season to find a running back. But Mario Anderson is very good. We have him projected at 16% ownership and about 15 points. I do like Anderson. I think he's a very interesting pivot play here.
All right. And lastly, we can touch on wide receiver here. Some additional guys. Again, Leggett at 8,700 I think is great. Xavier Worthy, potentially that Texas passing game gets a little bit more of a look now with Brooks out. Barry and Brown's coming in with a pretty high ownership percentage for Kentucky simply because it's a good matchup and he's really cheap at 5,500 on FanDuel. Let's see. Luther Burden is on the slate for Missouri, and you mentioned liking Brady Cook, so that's an obvious pairing there. Anybody else at wide receiver on FanDuel that we missed?
I do like Jalen Polk. I'm surprised. I don't know. Maybe it's because he's on the FanDuel main slate. We have not talked about Washington, Oregon State. Michael Penix, I do believe, might have lower ownership than what we would normally expect. Let me go back for half a second. What do we have at Penix?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, 2%.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I have a sneaky GPP FanDuel with Michael Penix, Jalen Polk, Rome Odunze coming back with Damian Martinez. I think people are staying away from it. We have the total is, I think it's 62.5. Washington has an implied total of 30. And what does Oregon State have?
It's basically a pick 'em. So
there you go. I mean, I think that game is an interesting smash spot that's not being talked about. I don't see anyone really mentioning that. I think they're afraid of Penix against the Beavers. And I get it. But, man, if I'm going to get a guy at 2% ownership with Penix and those receivers, I do like it, man, with running back with Damian Martinez on the other side, my friend.
Yeah, I've got no issues with that at all. I think really interesting option for some tournament builds on FanDuel that's going to be sneaky low owned on this slate here today. All right, I think we are good. We caught up on the questions. BYU has confirmed that Jake Retzlaff will start at quarterback again today. That was expected. We had that in the projections. And I think that will do it for today. So thanks to TJ, as always, for working hard and producing behind the scenes for us. Thanks to John for joining me. John, anything else before we get out of here?
No, just enjoy the games, everyone. And Justin, have a great day, my friend.
And you as well. Thanks to all of you for watching. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week. Until then, for all of you celebrating in the States, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you all stay safe and well, and safe travels if you happen to be on the road or flying somewhere. And we'll catch you back here next weekend, everybody. For John, I'm Justin. We'll see you later.